today is also a special day. Today is the 17th of Tammuz on the Jewish calendar, and it begins a period of 3 weeks. The period of 3 weeks, literally, it's called the period of the 3 weeks, and it begins on the 17th of Tammuz and it ends on the 9th of Av. The 9th of Av was the day that the temples in Jerusalem were destroyed, the same day, in different years, of course, but they were both destroyed on the 9th of Av. Av is the Jewish month of the 11th month on the Jewish calendar, and the 9th of Av is literally the Jewish 9/11. That both temples fell on that day. You think of the image of the two towers falling. They didn't fall at the same time, of course, about 500 years apart, but they fell on the same date on the Jewish calendar. Today, the 3 weeks before, is a very significant date. And people, of course, would ask, I understand why you would commemorate the 9th of Av, the day of the destruction of the temple. But why would you commemorate the day 3 weeks before? What's so important 3 weeks before? So today, a few things happened. But the major thing that happened is that the Romans destroyed the temple, on the 9th of Av. But today, 3 weeks before, they breached the walls of Jerusalem. So the lesson here, and it's a fast day, so I've been fasting. This is my second talk today. But what it means is that something has to be protected so the real thing doesn't get destroyed. So if you think in your life something that you value very much, right, you don't just put it out on the table. If it's a very expensive vase, you'll put it behind the glass. So if in a store, if it's an expensive item, they put it behind something, or they lock it somehow. So if somebody breaks the lock or breaks the glass that the vase is behind, it's a very short distance to the vase. So the walls of Jerusalem, of course, physically they protect the city, but figuratively on a spiritual level or on even a different practical level, they represent the defense line that we have to protect. And if the walls of Jerusalem are breached, then the temple will be destroyed very shortly after. And that really is the lesson of today, to guard something before it becomes vulnerable. So if we're talking about the law, if it's a religious law, if it's a secular law, doesn't matter. If you start breaking certain laws, then you get chaos, and then it collapses. So the temple was destroyed because of internal conflict. And the reason that the Romans were able to breach the walls of Jerusalem is because they were aided in many ways by certain factions inside. So that is, I'll give you just one example. The Romans besieged Jerusalem for 3 years. The siege lasted 3 years, and the Jews could have lasted more because they had food, they had sources of water, the Hezekiah's tunnel. They could have lasted more, but those radical people from the inside wanted them to lose, and they burnt the food. the barns with the wheat and the food. So they had to surrender because they were starving. So this is a very, very important lesson that we have to protect, put protecting walls and measures before, if something that we value to protect. I'll just end with the fact that the temple lasted 420 years, the second temple. So 420 years. And how long did it last after the destruction of the wall, the breach of the wall? Only 3 weeks. And that's really the immune system fell. So if the immune system collapses, then of course the body collapses. And that's the lesson from today.
And so remember that there were the two temples, first temple, second temple. So you always hear those phrases. First temple was built by King Solomon in 920 or somewhere like that, 940 BC. Lasted a couple of hundred years until 587 when the Babylonians came and clobbered the temple again. But it is interesting what that means is that that on the same day, centuries later, the second temple, the first temple is destroyed. Then there's a hiatus of 70 years or so, and then they come back and build the second temple. At that point, it's going to be very small, not as big as it once was, but then actually it keeps going and they expand it more and more. And then King Herod decides he wants to ingratiate himself to the people of Jerusalem. So he was a master builder and built this crazy big platform and put the temple on top. So that temple was finished, interestingly, not finishing, because they always could add. And very interestingly, just in time for the presentation in the temple. If you're a rosary prayer, you know that one of the mysteries of the rosary, the presentation of the temple, that the temple was never bigger and be more beautiful. Herod began it maybe, I think, 23 BC. So around the year 0, Jesus is born, more or less. And we get to, so that the temple was designed beautifully. Then after, in the year 70, 40 years or so after the death and resurrection of Christ, then the second temple is destroyed. So there's not been one there now for 2,000 years. So I think it's really important to try to get that timeline. These are major events in Jewish history and in Christian history too. So that the two temples and then destroyed on the same day. One of the first things we started talking about finally fell over, and then it's 9/11, and that's how you literally say it in Hebrew. Tish B'Av means 9/11. Wow, holy moly.
The 9th day of Av, which is the 11th month. So it's the 9/11, but we write from right to left. So it literally is 9/11.
Then one more thing I'll just say, that there's another curious thing in my mind anyway. Of all the feast days in the church, the Catholic Church, we have all these different feast days, different saints and people and all this stuff. There's one holy day that is mandatory. You have to celebrate it. The priest, if it happens on a Tuesday, I can't say, oh, I want to forget about it. Okay, it's a big one. And the big one is the Feast of St. John Lateran. And it is literally about a building. It's the first public mass ever that the Pope Sylvester was there and Constantine. And it was the blessing of this basilica. For the first time, a public mass is ever offered. For 300 years, it's always in the catacombs or wherever they're going to do it. But to have the emperor there and the Pope at the same event, same mass, and then curiously, guess what day is that? The 9th of November, 9/11, or 11/9. We'll say November 9, but it's 9/11. I don't know. So I think that's really, I just thought that was so fascinating that, that feast day got celebrated, and it always messed me up in the week because I wasn't ready for it, and it would always surprise me. So I said, what is this place? It's a church. Why don't we have a feast of the building of, the Vatican, St. Peter's? Why not this place, that place? Never knew the story, never knew the history. So I think it's funny. It's that 9/11 thing. I don't know.
My view of the 9/11, somehow it happens, the 9 and the 11, these numbers keep repeating themselves. I feel like, God gave us 10 commandments. We should stick to the 10. We shouldn't add and we shouldn't subtract.
No, 9 or 11.
So that really the way I look at it, and actually the Torah tells us you shouldn't add and you shouldn't subtract. It is one of the commandments. And in Jewish law, when you want to come up with a new rule or a new, if, for example, in the diaspora, we celebrate a second day of holidays because it's a long story. It took them 2 days to announce in the diaspora when the new moon started in Jerusalem. But there was a discussion. Is it considered not to add? If you add another day to a holiday, right? Rosh Hashanah is the day that is celebrated 2 days everywhere in Israel too. But let's say Passover. Passover in Israel is 1 day, and then of course the 7 day in between. But here it's 2 days. So is that considered adding? So these are the conversations. So, but you were not supposed to add, and we're not supposed to subtract. And by the way, if we quote Jesus in the New Testament, he said, "I did not come to add or subtract to the law."
To fulfill the law.
Yeah, right. But he does use he didn't come to add or to subtract. He's like to fulfill the law. So it means that he knew about that concept, of course. You're supposed to stick to the 10. So it's very interesting. So,
and then just another, a piece that goes along with that. They have the 10 commandments, and like you're saying, what protect it. This is the center, protect that. And then they build a fence around the 10 commandments.
The Torah,
building around the Torah. So and how many laws keep you from getting anywhere near those 10? Then there's 613. 613 other laws that are applicable to men and women, different laws for men and women, and then in Israel and out of Israel. So there's all kinds of possibilities, but they all total to 613. What does 6, 1, and 3 add up to? 10.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of a cool thing to remember. 613 laws they build a fence around the Torah.
So I'll give you another example of what it means, and that pertains to the walls of Jerusalem being breached. So the commandment is not to light fire on Shabbat. That's from the Torah. So the fence that we create around it to protect it is that you cannot touch anything, any instrument that would allow you to light the fire. So on Shabbat, matches are restricted. You can't touch matches. That's not the commandment. The commandment is not to light fire. But because you want to take and create a fence around it to protect it, you're not allowed to touch matches or a lighter, because think about it. If you already have matches in your hand, you may come to light the fire or a lighter. So that's the importance of today, is to building that fence around the Torah.
You had a question?
In Torah, is it 11/9 or 9/11? When you reference
The day of the destruction of the temple, it's the 9th day of the 11th month. So it is a 9/11, yeah.
Everywhere in the world, they put the month first, then the date.
No, in Israel, you put
September
the
11th.
day first.
Right, the day first. The 11th Of
So it'll be
September.
9/11, the ninth day of the 11th
September.
month. Yeah, okay. And now we can begin with our today's topic. We left Egypt, we crossed the Sea of Reeds, and now the journey has begun in the desert. We're now working towards receiving the Torah in Mount Sinai, and some things happened on the way, and we started last time talking about the 12 wells or springs that came on, and it was somehow God showed them an oasis that had the 12 springs and the 72 date palms, if you remember, for each tribe. And we talked about it in length, what it means, that the major idea, and then we'll look now today into also two main concepts, which are the food, the manna, and the meat. So the bread is the manna, and the meat is the quail that came from heaven. So, but what it means is that the journey now in the desert is under the protection of God. So God is going to take care of the Israelites in every way possible, like children, like babies, infants that can't take care of themselves. Once they cry, God will attend to them immediately and see what happens, what they're missing, and will provide for them. It's the same idea as the Garden of Eden, that God protected and provided for the people. So now, the Garden of Eden, there was a way to be expelled from the Garden of Eden too, right? So in the desert, even though they're in the wilderness, there's also a way to be expelled from the desert. And what does that mean, to be expelled from the desert? It could be different ways, either by death, that God would somehow bring a disease or a sickness and people will die, or that they will die of natural causes, but not going to complete the journey. Like completing the journey is really then entering the land, the promised land. So we'll see, of course, with the drama that happened in the desert, that most of the people are not going to make it into the land, into the promised land. Most of the people will die in the desert. So in a sense, that generation that lived now in the Exodus from Egypt are not going to enter the land. So in a sense, there is a failure in one sense, but this is a natural progression, that you can't just skip from the generation of, let's say, the Depression. A lot of people who grew up during the Depression, you can't ask them to be flamboyant, right? And with their money or with their resources, they can't. It's just they're too much stuck in the Depression. So this generation that left Egypt is the generation of the Depression. That, of course, there were slaves. They look at resources totally differently. And one of the mental issues that slaves would have is that they expect everything to be provided for them by their master, that they see themselves as incapable of providing for themselves. And the point of the desert was to shift to independence from a mindset of incapability, that I can't provide for myself, I'm a baby, I'm an infant, to I'm independent, I'm taking responsibility. If something is not there, I will try to find it or provide for it. That's the mindset. Okay. So we are on in our book, page 386.
Six.
Yeah. We did not speak about the slave, quail last night. Okay, we can start actually on page 385 with, if you're looking at other sources, it's Exodus chapter 16, verse 4. So the top of the page, and it says, "The Lord said to Moses, Behold, I shall rain down for you food from heaven. Let the people go out and pick each day's portion of its day, so that I can test them, whether they will follow me, my teachings, or not." So that is now an exercise of faith, and the manna itself is the same word for faith, emunah in Hebrew. And what is emunah? What is faith? Is the daily bread. Right? That's give us today our daily bread. So the daily bread is the manna, and they could not hold on to it for 2 days. The only 2 days that they could hold on to it was, what was the 2 days? The Sabbath. They pick it on Friday, and it lasts until after Shabbat. So they don't have to work on Shabbat and pick the manna.
And the phrase is double portion. They get a double portion.
Yeah.
Every other day they get one portion. And then, as we're going to see, they're going to try to say, well, I'm going to get as much as I can. And they can't hold it. Very interesting how that just works. So it would rot just when, after one day. So they couldn't store it and make their own arrangements. So we'll see that.
Okay. I'm gonna skip a little to verse 11 because we kind of talked about last time. I want to repeat it. You can always look at the recording from last time on the website.
Just
And
read
we
the whole
won't
thing.
say, read it? Okay.
Yeah.
And it says, and it shall be that on the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring, it will double what they pick every day. So there was a phenomenon, and we'll read later in the text, that even if you wanted to pick more, you didn't have more. It's kind of miraculously, you only picked what you needed. So, and if you picked less, somehow you still had enough. So that's and of course, if people say, "Oh, really? Wow, that's odd." It's not odd. We live in God's world was all right miracles. We're already in miraculous time of the plagues, and then there's the crossing the Sea of Reeds and everything. So for a phenomenon like that to happen is not beyond our concept. And it says, Moses and Aaron said to all the children of Israel, in the evening you shall know that the Lord took you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord. And he heard the complaints against the Lord. For what we are, for what are we that you should incite complaints against us? So Moses and Aaron said, your complaint's not against us, it's against God. But when you complain to God at this point, or against God at this point, what are you really saying? You're saying that the entity that provided for you up until here with all these miracles now is forsaking you and is not able to take care of you for the future. So these stories affected me very much, and I live like that, because you face times when you really they're so unknown, and you have to believe. You have to look back and say, I'm whatever age you are, I'm 52, for 52 years, God provided for me. He watched even before, he watched my family in Yemen, and then in the desert when my parents walked for a year. He provided for them. And then I was born in Israel when after the 6 Day War already, that Jerusalem was united. And And then he provided for me in America for 30 years that since I've immigrated. So would I now stop and say, I don't believe you can provide for me? How can you say that? How can you say that? So that's really where God wants them to be. Without seeing God right in front of them, to believe that God is there. That's the exercise of the whole desert experience, but definitely that daily bread.
So you are seeing food in the desert. Hope that connects to the loaves and the fishes. That's what we're seeing here. So what would the Jews have thought about? They would have known this story very well. And now Jesus appears and he's multiplying bread and fish. So, okay, so you're catching these stories. I always like to say it's one revelation in two parts. So one God, one revelation, but he's working the journey. So it's always about connecting the dots. When we as Christians who are here, Christians, you want to always ask that question. Okay, how would with the diminished, we're more familiar, of course, with the New Testament, but these are the roots of those stories too, here in the Hebrew scripture.
Yeah, and when we read about the morning and evening, Moses is referring to your complaints, morning and evening, right? It means that they complained a lot. So, it's always worth repeating that joke about the Hadassah luncheon.
Do you know what Hadassah is?
It's the women of Hadassah, and the waiter comes to the table and asks them, "Is anything okay?"
Yeah.
But the reason they were stuck in the desert is because of their complaints.
So the ultimate complaint that they had, if you heard Linda, she's asking, is that why they lasted, or they had to stay in the desert for 40 years? Because that was supposed to be a short trip. They were supposed to get the Torah and direct line to the Holy Land. And but they took the local train. And every complaint was a stop. So, and the ultimate complaint was that they complained when they came back from visiting the Holy Land, right? When Moses sends the 12 scouts, because they wanted to go see it. We'll get to it, but they came back. It's in the book of Numbers, but the book of Numbers in Israel, in Hebrew, is really the book of in the wilderness, in the desert, and it describes those events. But they go to scout the land, and 10 out of 12 have come back with the bad report, and say about the land that this is the land that devours its settlers, right? That there are giants there, that the cities are walled cities. There's no way that they can ever conquer that land. And at that point, Moses and of course God said, okay, you don't deserve, or you're not, it's not necessarily a punishment, but it really is, you're not ready for it. If you can't see the beauty of this land that I'm giving you, I can't give it to you. Same thing with the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve were not on the mindset, on the level that they could stay there, because they didn't say, we're sorry that we sinned, and stayed in the Garden of Eden. They ran away from God, right? Instead of saying, Hineni, here I am, they ran away. So same thing. They're not there to receive the present. They went away from God. So God can't give them the present. So they stayed for 40 years. That's what I was referring, that whole generation did not enter the land. They died in the desert because of that incident. because that was the ultimate complaint. Okay, so in verse 9 it says, Moses said to Aaron, say to the entire assembly of the children of Israel, approach the presence of the Lord, for he has heard your complaint. When Aaron spoke to the entire assembly of the children of Israel, they turned to the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in a cloud. Okay, so they still need those instruments to see God somehow. God cannot be there in the body, but as a cloud, as a spirit. And then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the complaint of the children of Israel. Speak to them, saying, in the afternoon you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be sated with bread, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God. You know what? I actually never read this verse in a way that I just figured something, maybe diet-wise. That's interesting. Like in the morning, you need more of the carbohydrate, the sugar, the energy, and then towards the afternoon, it doesn't even say night, just afternoon, you eat protein. You know what? I will try it for 40 days. The next time we see each other, we'll see if it's successful.
See if it works.
Yes. So then page 387, verse 13, in chapter 16 in Exodus, it was towards evening that the quail ascended and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. The layer of dew ascended and behold, upon the surface of the wilderness was something thin, exposed, thin as frost on the earth. Then Moses said to them, the children of Israel saw and said to one another, it is food. So in Hebrew, it is manhu. It's what is it? They literally, those two words they use is manhu. What is this? Right? The translation is already taking some approach of explanation, but they ask themselves, what is it? And it's a very interesting thing because the word what is it in Hebrew creates the word mana, manhu. What is it? So even the question of what is it is the first question we ask as faithful people, or when we have a question, what is it? You're in a situation in life. What is it? I don't know. Because if you know everything, it's not faith. So you have to start with the question, what is it? And I don't know, in the model Seder, we definitely do that. We ask the 4 questions, and the Seder night, what you would have as the Last Supper, there were many questions. It's part of it's part of the liturgy, is to ask questions, because it's an exercise of faith. So what is it? They're asking, what is it? If they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, this is the food that the Lord has given you for eating. This is the thing that the Lord has commanded. Gather from it for every man according to what he eats. Okay, so God, in a sense, is telling us to treat this as animals eat. Like animals only eat as much as they can. They don't stuff themselves. Once they're full, they're full. And really, they don't, some, of course, gather for a little bit later, like squirrels or lions. They do have a little bit as a stash, but in general, they eat when they need to eat. So given for you for eating, so just eat, gather it from it, every man according to what he eats, and omer per person. Omer was the amount according to the number of your people. Everyone according to whoever is in tent shall you take. So Omer, you can look at it as maybe serving. So if you have 5 people in the tent, take 5 serving. The children of Israel did so, and they gathered whoever took more and whoever took less, right? It didn't matter. They measured in an omer, and whoever took more had nothing extra, and whoever took less was not lacking. So this is amazing. This is the beginning of the biblical theology in as a nation and how to act with God, because it's the when we look at life and we think that we can outsmart God and take a shortcut, right? So, or for example, the way we talk about is in the context of charity. So let's say you see a poor person and you have enough money to give them, but let's say you give $20, right? But you really were supposed to give $40, right? You're thinking, I'm saving here. You'll lose $20 somehow else in a different way. And on Rosh Hashanah, we always say that God cuts life and he measures and he knows how much a person should earn this year and how much they should give out. And if they don't, somehow they'll make it or they'll lose it. It doesn't matter. You can, let's say, don't make it the whole year. And then the last day, something will come up and you'll find something that will give you an income. So this is the point. The point is to have our daily bread and to be happy with what we have now, here and now. Dogs teach us that, to be here and now. That's very important. So Moses measured and gathered according to Moses said to them, no man will leave over from it until morning. Okay, so you can't gather and keep it. But they did not obey Moses, and people left over from it until morning, and it became infested with worms. Right? That's the point. You can't outsmart God. And it stank. And Moses became angry with them. They gathered in morning by morning, every man according to what he eats, and when the sun grew hot, it melted. So before the afternoon, right? They were supposed to eat it before the afternoon because the quail came in the afternoon, and if it didn't last. And that's the beauty of bread too. I always make that distinction because matzah or a cracker, right? They last forever, but bread, it comes in different shapes, forms, tastes, everything. But there's one thing that is common to bread. It gets stale the next day. Doesn't matter. If you don't eat it fresh, it's not the same. So it happened on the 6th day that they gathered a double portion of food, 2 omers for each. And all the princes of the assembly came and told Moses. He said to them, this is what the Lord has spoken. Tomorrow is a rest day, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you wish to bake and cook what you wish to cook, and whatever is left over, put away for yourselves as a safekeeping until the morning. So the only day that they can keep was for the Sabbath. So really, we're now reading here about the first Sabbath in the Bible. Because since the creation, we actually don't hear that Abram, Isaac, and Jacob kept the Sabbath. It's very interesting. These are different stories. There's stories about the drama they had, the evolution of their character, of their faith, but it never says, that they observed the Sabbath or they stopped their journey for the Sabbath. This is the first Sabbath that we hear about. So every time we need to learn about a concept, we go to the first time we hear about it. And of course, the first time is creation, that God ceased his creation and rested and so forth, made it holy. But here, as the people, so the first thing, one of in order to create a community, a society, you have to have the Sabbath. Sabbath is where we meet with each other and when we meet with God. We meet with God in the sense of very, very important, that we stopped working. We stopped working on that day. So if we're slaves to something, it means that we cannot stop. We can't cease, right? So when we stop for the Sabbath, it's telling ourselves we're not slaves. And that's where we meet with God, in that freedom, the no slavery, coming out of Egypt.
Yeah.
And then we meet, of course, with each other because we have time to gather. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm just thinking about like, so today, should we be, not cooking on the Sabbath, which would be actually Saturday, but it's all right for us as Christian Catholics to have a celebration on Monday, Sunday, which is the first day of the week? Is that
So-
why, like, if you think about
Well, we-
that,
That's a
the
question.
Yeah, we
Could you
ran-
repeat
yeah.
the question.
Yeah, well, the question, like, what can you do for Christians on Sunday? Not cook and not this or that, but we don't have the obligations to not do all that stuff. We're supposed to rest and not supposed to do servile work. Servile work on Sunday. So,
It's not actually the Sabbath then, or at least.
no, we switched the Sabbath, of course, to Sunday because it's the Lord's resurrection. So probably the first decades of the church, they did still do Shabbat. They said they went to the temple and they would still go to the temple, but then they would gather on the Sunday to remember this Passover and the resurrection. So it did switch to the Sunday and not the Sabbath, because more Gentiles started coming in the first decades, then they outnumbered the Jews. So they would go with each day, whatever, okay, it's Sunday, so it's the first day of the week. It's the first day of the new creation. You kind of put yourself, this is why even, maybe you never even thought of it, but baptismal fonts usually are octagonal. They have eight sides to it. So the idea is you're being baptized into the first day of the new creation. So you're going through a death experience, a near-death experience, and you're coming out the other side through Christ. So you go into the eighth day. So it shifted, but I think
In the times of Paul.
yeah, with St. Paul and all the rest, the first couple of decades, they shifted it. So, but what is important is, I really do try to watch it myself now. All these years now thinking about Shabbat, that we've just blown away Sunday. I mean, maybe they go to church, maybe, but what's that?
That day at 5.
Yeah, Saturday. Well, that's okay. Saturday, that's nice that we kind of restored that, the Saturday night thing. So that gives us an idea of like on the Jewish timing, it's the evening. The day for Shabbat comes Friday night into Saturday. So we're kind of giving that leeway there. We put in the Saturday night now. We can go to mass on Saturday night, have a church service, a mass.
But that's why it's important to keep those fences around. So if you shouldn't be going to shop on, even if it's a Sunday and that's your Sabbath, don't get in the car. Or don't, I know it sounds outrageous to think about, but that's what you need to do. Because if you're in the car already, then you just say, you know what, I'm just gonna stop at the post office and pick up the mail and buy milk. If there's no cheating on the Sabbath. That's the very interesting thing. You're only cheating yourself. If you don't give yourself a day of rest, you don't have a day of rest. Nobody is on top of you to tell you, because it's a day that symbolizes freedom. But freedom, that was my talk this morning, is that freedom comes through restrictions. To be free, you have to restrict yourself. The Constitution is the law, but it provides us with the freedom. So that's really what it is. If you want to be free, to have a freeing experience, you have to limit yourself.
Well, I got one more question then, as far as like the, you know, like the time. Like, I try to not work on Sunday myself, right? But I kind of like, I don't know if I'm kind of manipulating the truth or whatever, but I try to work like after sunset on Sunday,
After sunset.
after sunset, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be, yeah, that's kosher.
No, so Joel's saying he works after sundown on Sunday, which follows the biblical day and night, because the day began with, there was an evening and there was morning, one day. Doesn't say there was morning and then there was evening. So that's why we start, of course, the day with sunset the day before. That's why for you, Mass on Sunday, you can also fulfill the obligation by going on Saturday night. Same idea. Yeah, so.
So any
that's
kind of
fine.
servile work, it can, gardening, mow the lawn, do you have to do it on a Sunday? I heard stories that, when a priest was driving along and he saw somebody he knew, a parishioner, mowing the grass on Sunday afternoon. So he got out of the car and said, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that. So, so it's any kind of stuff you can put
And what
off
happened to
for
the
another
priest?
day. Nothing. Yeah, he was right. He was right. The guy mowed him over. But it is, when you think about it, it is a day of rest, to rest yourself, and not to be able to have that one day shows your slavery to whatever else you just never stopped then, When I was doing real estate, it was a big problem. I would have to show houses on Sunday and open houses and all that stuff. So, you have to compromise. I certainly try not to shop, but of course today I had to get dog food. So I did go after Mass this morning and get some dog food so think of it, you're gonna let those dogs starve, so get the dog food. But as a matter of every day I go shopping on Sunday, maybe not. Because you go with your family, you go to the dinner, get some people, recreation, you're supposed to do recreation. Look at that word, recreation. If you're not recreating, you're just like this. And there's a beautiful story, I don't know, Talmud somewhere, one of the books, but the emperor of Rome, he commands everything. And he says to the rabbi, where do you get this idea? You get off for a day. Like, what he said, our God says, you're supposed to get off. And so like, that was just incomprehensible. I own you. You're my slave. You work all the time. But God said, no, you're not supposed to work all the time. So 6 days for working and 7th. And I really think that would change a lot about how this country and the world is working at the moment. Now we don't have that time. And to be with people and to recreate ourselves, recreation. So think about how you might be able to implement that. I don't know how, but
Yeah, it's the fear, it's a FOMO, fear of missing out.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we check our phone every minute. We can't really settle. So, and Shabbat is the ultimate faith. And we say the blessing, the source of blessing is the Sabbath, because it's the Sabbath has everything, all the relationship. It has the relationship with God, the relationship with man, the relationship with ourselves. It's faith that you're able to stop. And ultimately, God wants us to be free people. He took us out of the house of slavery, right? The system of slavery, Egypt, that doesn't let you breathe, and to the house of God, which we will be building now, which is the house of freedom. So the Sabbath is telling yourself, telling God, telling the world that you are now off for 24 hours. It's interesting, and Susie, I've been Orthodox for many years, Orthodox Jew, and I mean, I'm a conservative rabbi, but my practice is more Orthodox Judaism. So I don't do anything on Shabbat. I don't cook. I don't, of course, drive and all that. And it's amazing because I have I have secular friends that I grew up with and everything. And when I shifted, little by little, I've seen my world shift. So would not get emails on Shabbat, not phone calls, nothing. My world knew that for 24 hours, 25 hours, I'm off. And one time I was hacked. My email was hacked or Facebook, and it sent to all my contacts, a message. And Reverend Ann, actually, that used to come to sometimes comes to our sessions. After Shabbat, I saw she sent an email to all the contacts saying it couldn't be Rabbi Gadi because he wouldn't send it on Shabbat. That's amazing. So the Shabbat, I would recommend seriously if you do it on Saturday or Sunday, but keep that as holy as you can, like the walls of Jerusalem. That's what it is. Once you make a breach on the wall, let me just go pick up the mail. You don't have the Sabbath. You destroyed your Sabbath. So try to create yourself a Sabbath that is just rest. You don't have to even go anywhere. One of the obligations in the Torah about Shabbat is to stay in your places. So even if it's a beautiful day out or this, don't make a chore out of your trip. Go around your neighborhood or somewhere close. Don't make it a chore. Even if you go to the beach or something, get easy. Susie.
I was just gonna say, when I was a kid, there was blue laws. Everybody, many schools just.
Mhm.
It is great, everybody to go shopping, we had to go to Brooklyn,
Started a little way.
Pickens Avenue, because that was a big Jewish section. So if you wanted to go shopping on a Sunday, you went to Brooklyn.
Jewish neighborhood.
Yeah, the blue laws, it's beautiful. When I travel in Europe, a lot of Europe has still the blue laws. The stores are closed on Sundays.
Play and Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
They're closed. Beautiful. So God says to us, I'll provide you with everything, food, drinks, protection, but I want to be with you. That's the point of God's creating the world and creating man. He wants the relationship. There's always this question, does God need us? And some people say, it's like a sin to think that God needs anything from us. But there are those who say, no, absolutely God needs something from us. He created us because he wanted something. What does he want? One thing. Relationship. The relationship. And the relationship is through, of course, the commandment. And the ultimate commandment is the Sabbath. It's right in the middle of the 10 commandments. You see the Sabbath after honoring your parents, because it needs to be a cornerstone. If you can't stop, if you can't observe a Sabbath, then you are a slave. And that means to God that you're never going to pay attention to him because you're always busy with your mind and supplying your own needs. When you observe the Sabbath, when you stop, you literally, the Shekhinah, the Shekinah, God's glory rests upon you. And I see from my experience, the food tastes differently. My mindset is totally different. For 6 days, I run like there's no tomorrow. I don't have a minute. But comes Shabbat, I just want to enjoy it. And I take a breather. And actually the commandment or the description, when God created the Sabbath, it says, he rested on the Sabbath and he took a breath, literally. Shavat vayinafash. The nefesh. He needed something for the nefesh. So we took a long time to explain this passage, but I can't stress the Sabbath more. Okay. And then it says how long? So the 6 days and the 7th day, some of the people went out to gather, and they did not find anything. And there's an incident in the New Testament too, right? That a man goes out to collect wheat from the field on the Sabbath, and people want to kill him, right?
Well, you're talking about the harvest thing on the Sabbath?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was David and the soldiers were.
No, but there was just a person who was definitely in the Torah, a person that was gathering wheat on the Sabbath, and the people wanted to kill him. And he was stoned to death. God said, yes, he needs to be stoned to death because he gives an example. He's breaching the wall of right, the protecting wall. But there's then the conversation in the New Testament that Jesus asks, is the Sabbath for man or man for the Sabbath?
They're walking through the fields.
Yeah, walking through the fields.
Walking through the field, but gathering, right, gathering the wheat in the field.
If they need strength while he's alive.
Yeah.
Something like, because he's alive, master is alive, while he's alive.
That's when the fasting, all of
Yeah.
that stuff, but yeah, it has to do with that's the big line that is going to be problematic for Jews. Is man made for the Sabbath or is Sabbath made for the man? And then he says, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. Well, okay, that's how that whole conversation ends there. I am the Lord of the Sabbath. Jewish ears hears that like, wow, what are you saying? You are gonna mitigate things.
Because it's so important, the relationship, but God created us for the relationship. And there's a similar story when we get to it in Mount Sinai, that it says that the Israelites camped at the foot of the mountain. But the word for foot of the mountain in Hebrew is the same word as under the mountain. So the midrash, the teaching of the rabbis, tell us that it was literally that God took the mountain and lifted it up, and the people of Israel were under the mountain, and he said to them, if you accept the 10 Commandments or my law and the covenant, really be in covenant with me, in a relationship with me, I will spare you. If not, I will drop the mountain on you and you will die. Which means the lesson of this teaching is that God created this whole world to be in relationship with us. So if we don't want to be in relationship with God, there's no point. So the Sabbath, because it's the meeting point between man and God, God mandates it. That it's the point of living is the Sabbath. That's the point. Not, yes, you work 6 days, but on the Sabbath, you feel what holiness is in life, and you connect to the purpose of life. Okay, we've been very wordy today. Sorry. So what happened? The Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to observe my commandment and my teaching? See that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why he gives you on the 6th day a 2-day portion of bread. Let every man remain in his place. See, you have to remain in your place. Let no man leave his place on the 7th day. And actually in Jewish law, you can't go more than 1,000 horse steps. That's the distance that is considered a Sabbath zone. And if you're beyond that zone, you have violated that commandment of not leaving your places. So you can be in your neighborhood. And by the way, that's the part of the idea of the wire that goes around neighborhood, right? You know, the eruv, that the wire there's in different neighborhoods. There's a wire that goes around the neighborhood to create one domain. So if people want to take something from their private domain, that's another restriction of the Sabbath. You can't move things from or carry things from a private domain to a public domain and vice versa. So it's to restrict us from trading, from really being busy working. So, but in order to make it possible for Jews to go to synagogue and carry their book or carry a stroller, then there's a wire that goes around neighborhoods. Who heard about that? Eruv. It's called Eruv.
Yeah, they did it in West Hampton
mix.
Beach. They've made a big
Yeah.
area, but they didn't let them, I think.
No, eventually they did.
They did, yeah.
Yeah,
There was a great
the-
cartoon on one of those Saturday Night Live or whatever it was. The guy was trying to figure out how do I, finagle it? Let me see what I can do. So he got this little hat and he put the wires on a little sticks around his hat. And he said, "This is my Eru. I can go everywhere now. Eru, I'm in my space."
That
So
was hilarious. So, yeah, oh, yeah.
Just wanted to show you the name of the book, but it was a terrific memoir that I read a number of years ago. And I read it a long time ago, but in essence, it was a community in Europe, a street in Europe, okay? And on one side of the street lived a Jewish community, on the other side of the street lived a Christian community. This is a memoir. This man wrote this, I believe in his late 80s or 90s. And so he was a Christian, he was on the Christian side, all right? And so there was a lot of ambivalence and a lot of politics between the two communities from one side of the road to the other. But on Fridays, the Jewish women would make the food for the next day. And they would take it across the street to their Christian neighbors, who would then heat the food and deliver it the next day.
Oh, wow.
So that was like the one aspect of it. If I remember the name of it, I'll try to get that.
Yeah, what's your name?
Linda.
Linda.
It was one of the best memoirs I ever read. It was a great history. I believe it happened in maybe the 30s or somewhere in Europe. And
Yeah, so well, I'm just gonna repeat it.
how to do the
Yeah, and it's part of this. I'm gonna explain how it's related. What you just said is related. Do you have a related question, Joel? Yeah?
My mother would always talk about how, I guess, where she grew up in the Bronx, there was a lot of Jewish and Catholics that would be interconnected. And on the days of Sabbath, that she had a little job where she had to go in, turn on light switches and turn on.
Shabbos Goy.
A Shabbat goy, right? It's again, it's not derogatory. Goy is not a derogatory word. It's just means a nation. Israel is also a goy. It's a nation, but somebody from the other nation. So I'm going to put together what Linda and Joel said. So Linda was talking about this book that she read about a European community that half of the street on the one side of the street was Jews and the other were Catholic. And then on Friday, the Jewish women would cook and bring the food to the Christian side to cook and then deliver it on the Sabbath. So that is part of that restriction of not cooking on Shabbat, not preparing food. Now, the thing is, and this is a very big discussion in Jewish sources, what does that mean not to cook on the Sabbath? Can you start the oven before the Sabbath and put your food and it could cook on its own? And then you can eat it hot or warm on Shabbat? Or there are those who are called karaim. Karaim are people who take these verses literally, and they said you can't even have the oven cook the food for you on the Sabbath. So it's not even about you not cooking. The food itself cannot be cooked on Shabbat. The Judaism we live, most of us today, is a rabbinic Judaism that allows that. That's why each Jewish community found a way to prepare food from on Friday that would cook overnight, slow cooking. So every community has their form of food that cooked overnight on Friday night, and then they would take it out and eat it on Shabbat. And the tractate, the chapter on the Sabbath in the Talmud, in the oral tradition, in the conversation of back and forth with the rabbis for 1,000 years, is the thickest because of all these intricacies and nuances on Shabbat, what's allowed, what's not. So those Catholics across the street, and again, there were times that people didn't have ovens. And there are stories of public ovens that because it was very expensive to have the wood, the people didn't have it at home. So they would go to one place in the middle of the town, and it was a public oven. And there are stories of people who then had to, they took other people's food. They mixed the pots and pans because they just didn't know. But that's what it means, not to cook on the Sabbath. So if you have a non-Jew cook it, then it's okay, and then you bring it.
When you're a professional, even Jewish professionals on the Sabbath, and they have to work, doctors, nurses, cops. What do they
Great
do?
question. So it's a very good question. What's your name?
Barbara.
Barbara. So I think what Barbara is asking is also related to that incident in the New Testament when they were walking through the field and gathering the wheat. I don't know exactly the context of it, but I think it was somehow an acute need, right? There was
Yeah,
somebody.
they were in the war. They had to eat.
The war. Okay, right. So there was something that they had needs of survival. So there is a rule in the Jewish law that if it is something that is an emergency or something that is life-threatening, it trumps Shabbat.
You can take your ox out of a ditch. If your oxen falls into a ditch, you can pull it out. You're saving life.
If the life is at risk.
Yeah.
If not, you have to come back after Shabbat and do that. So, but if it's anything, so if you are an emergency worker somehow, you're a firefighter, police, doctor, you're allowed, there's a dispensation for that. You can do that. But even within that, let's say you are you're on your shift in the hospital and you're an emergency room doctor. It doesn't mean that in between patients, you can go and cook your food in the dining room, right? You only have to concentrate on what is needed. So yes, that's permitted. Yeah.
For question for Father. In the old days, or in Catholicism, wasn't it also like a sin if you had someone actually like cook for you or something like that on that day that you're not supposed to cook, or like I guess what I'm thinking of is if you own a business, if you have a job, you cannot even ask your non-Catholic, workers to actually go to work. You have to not to.
Well, again, it's really not as strict as maybe it once was, but then that's how interestingly, Catholics and Jews or Christians and Jews did work out stuff. Okay, we're closed on Saturday and you're closed on Sunday, and people navigated, so
Yeah.
figured it out. Yeah.
We have Barry too.
Right. So on the Sabbath, if it's a matter, if you're at war, if it's any life-threatening situation, emergency, you do it. But even in, let's say, if you take the Israeli army today, there are platoons that are observant platoons, and there are platoons that are not observant people.
I'm trying.
secular Israelis and religious. So if you're religious, you observe the Sabbath. If you can, of course, if you need to patrol, if you need to guard, and if you're in an emergency, absolutely.
Well, the Yom
Trump-
Kippur War was.
Yeah.
started
Absolutely.
if it could- And it was a sneak attack, and so, of course, you had to respond.
Yeah, so I want to be able to finish this chapter. So verse 31, the house of Israel called it manna. It was like coriander seed. It was white and it tasted like a cake fried in honey.
Every time
Wow,
something
it
I
was
want
the
to do.
best thing you can ever taste, and actually,
Yeah, it does.
the midrash, so they even complain about that.
It actually does.
Like, oh, steak again? I'm vegetarian, so I don't do that, but I know that people that love steaks, like, they eat steak every day? I don't know.
It's my ear.
Some
Oh,
people
okay,
can
I'm
take
sorry.
it. But they complained about it, but the
Yeah.
midrash said, the teaching said that it wasn't just tasting
I'll just listen
amazing,
this way.
cake
I'm not
fried.
listening. Shh. I'm just listening with my phone.
Also had any taste you wanted. So if you thought of ice cream, it would taste like ice cream. If you wanted whatever, strawberries, it tasted like strawberries. So that's what God provided for them. And Moses said, this is the thing that the Lord has commanded. A full omer of it shall be a safekeeping for your generations, so that they will see the food with which I fed you in the wilderness when I took you out of Egypt. So in the Ark of the Covenant, they kept manna. So one of the items that when the Ark of the Covenant will be found, when you open it, you'll see manna in it. And then we'll see what how it preserved itself. But you say, oh, but it preserved itself for 3,000 years. Yes,
It's got honey.
it's it's like the tree of life, that it's in the presence of God, that it does not diminish. So it's like the bread, the show bread. Over the week, they change it every Shabbat, but for the whole week, the bread on the table, the show bread, did not get stale the next day. So for the whole week, it was totally fresh. Moses, yeah.
This would have been in the Holy of Holies, so there were the three furnishings, the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, and then the showbread. So those three things would be there.
Yeah. Moses said to Aaron, take one jar and put a full omer, right, that serving of manna into it. Place it before the Lord for a safekeeping for your generations. As the Lord had commanded Moses, Aaron placed it before the ark of the testimony for a safekeeping. The children of Israel ate the manna for 40 years until their arrival in an inhabited land. They ate the manna until their arrival at the border of the land of Canaan. The omer is a tenth of an ephah. So whatever the ephah was, it was a tenth of it. So maybe a handful. Right? So the portions also, we are used to American portions. And that's one of the
Remember, when you come up, you have to
for
look
me
both
was a
ways.
cultural shock.
There's
When
a
I
highway
moved
that
from
goes.
Israel to America, the portions, the plates are bigger. And it's just, you eat in Israel, but I mean, and I'm sorry to say, I became very Americanized that way. But you start eating when you're full.
Stop eating.
Well, no,
Or you start eating.
you
Keep
keep
eating.
eating when you're full. Let just stuff myself. You're really supposed to eat just until your stomach tells you it's enough. But here we're used to let's push it. Let's see how much we can shove some more. And that's not what we're asked to do here. But okay, so that's I'll explain one important thing here. It says, they ate the manna until their arrival at the border of the land of Canaan, which means that the manna was only for the desert. Now that they will, after they enter the land of Israel, they will now have to do what? To grow their own food. Right? That's the responsibility that now they have to take of their food. So this is why we say, if you've been to any bread blessing of the bread, we say, thank you, God, for bringing forth bread from the earth. But isn't that obvious that bread comes from the earth? No. Actually, for 40 years, it came from heaven. So when it comes from earth, it means that we are now, the wine and the bread are these two creations that are partnership between God and man. What it's the God's provision and the work of the human hand.
Yeah, so the bread, of course, both bread, wheat and grapes they give up their independence or individuality, they're crushed, and then they become one. Interesting. So this is all Eucharistic images for the Catholics that are here, Christians. And then, bread from heaven, the bread of heaven, the bread of life. And it's interesting too, the scripture will say, they call it flesh, but it's quail. We have a different word in English. I don't know about Hebrew, but we don't say chicken flesh or bird flesh. It's poultry, or we use different meat or something. Yeah, but flesh is a kind of a weird word, and it is in the text there at different points. So the flesh, the bread, and there's no wine yet, but we see that it's going to eventually appear. But it's so all these images for us are. This is foundational stuff. This is called typology in theology or scripture study. So a type, whatever something is, its type, it kind of repeats, and you hear the rhyme going through into the New Testament. So, bread from heaven was manna. Now we would see it as Eucharist. So
there's no, in Hebrew, there's no there aren't two words for flesh. It's flesh and meat are the same word.
Same word.
Same word. And the meat is compared to, or the flesh, not the meat, the flesh is compared to the body. The bread. The bread is the flesh. It's the same idea. So that's where it
Bread
came
and
from.
flesh.
Yeah,
and flesh.
bread is flesh. That's where
Wow.
Jesus got it from. I mentioned it. I mentioned it.
More than a word.
I mentioned it in the past that where the source for it in the Bible, in the Torah, is the story of Joseph when he tells his the wife of Potiphar, his boss that is chasing him, that he cannot betray his boss because he believes in him and he gives him everything and all the control in the house. There's only one thing that he's denied is the flesh, the bread that he eats. But the rabbis tell us it's a euphemism. It's a clean language of saying that it's the wife. So the bread that he eats is the wife. So that's the flesh. So that's where we get the idea of the bread is the flesh. There are a couple of other examples, but that I believe is the first example that the idea of that our body is bread and our soul, spirit is wine, or blood is wine. So that appears many times also. So that it's definitely a Jewish concept. Jesus was Jewish. I mean, I think that's really, if you want to, there's the title and the subtitle of Project Genesis, right? Project Genesis under the subtitle is Jesus was Jewish. That's what basically we're trying to say here. So at this point, everything I've studied with Father Roy for 20 years now, we're doing this for 20 years. For 20 years now, right? That I became a rabbi through this. And this is an amazing thing that happened here. It really is incredible. So there's not one thing that I do not see in Judaism, in the New Testament or Christianity, not a concept, not text, anything. All comes from the Hebrew scripture, everything. There's one thing, I don't know if you want, but we're finished with the chapter, and next time we'll start chapter 17. There's one thing that I have, even theologically, I don't have even the issue with, Jesus is God in the flesh, right? So even though it's not my faith, so to speak, but I don't see it as impossibility. If God created this world and he wants to come to this world as a human being, who am I to say that he can't do it? So this is where I am with this. But there's one thing, and I hope that there's one thing I have to say, and maybe it's like your homework for next time and for you too. There's the one thing, well, I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. That's your faith. But one thing that I still struggle is that we see the Messiah as a human being. So, like, if Jesus was a Messiah or a king, or God, okay, I could manage this in my mind. But the fact that he's is God and Messiah, that's the only paradigm I cannot solve, because we believe that the Messiah has to be a human being riding the donkey, right? Riding the material to show us how a human being overcomes their inclination. But if you're God, then okay, you have a head start. So that's the only question but otherwise we would both be Christians at this point, or we'd both be Jews. So until we resolve that, Project Genesis will exist as an interfaith conversation.
When we first started getting into that stuff there, he said, to talk about Adam and Eve and the evil inclination, and donkey represents your evil inclination. It's a type. And he's going on about the donkey and what. And so then he says, well, when the Messiah comes, he'll teach us how to ride the donkey. And I went, Jesus rode the donkey. He said, he did? When? I said, oh, on Sunday. It's a big event, so in the story, so he's riding the donkey. So it is like how to conquer your materiality. So then the image is that the flip of that is the donkey rides you, or the monkey on your back.
Yeah, the material. You should ride material.
It's riding me. It makes me do what it wants to do, and the whole.
That's the slavery, and that's why Shabbat is the most important, because you put the material to the side, and you're not in that.
You're not driven by
it. You're taking a break. Just want to say, if you still have not given your name, if you want to join us on the trip, we are going to come out with the flyer this week. We finally have our pricing and final itinerary and everything. So if you want to join us, please let us know. There was one thing I wanted to say about it, but I forgot.
Just leave your email. We can send you the flyer once it's produced.
Yeah.
We'll put it out.
One thing.
And then there is the baskets over there if you'd like to leave a donation for us. So we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Pay our bills.
Very good.
do we have to let you know, or can we?
August 3rd, I think.
August 3rd.
I'm sorry, August 3rd.
Yeah, it has to, it's a registration and the lunch is included. So they're gonna make a lunch and all that, so at the press center.
Thank you
So-
very much, everybody.